The Zimmer News Team and your host, Randy Tobler.
While talks go on in an attempt to end the war itself rages on in new and unprecedented ways. Over the weekend, Ukraine launching drones targeting military air bases across Russia. Over 40 bombers claimed to have been hit. That would basically be a third of Moscow's long-range fleet. That's a huge toll.
Well, that's Greg Palcott in his very unique style, describing what was really, I think, the new face of warfare, at least part of this story, over in Russia. It's technology is ruling our world, whether it's AI in your everyday life or drones attacking Russian bombers smuggled in in little tiny houses on trucks. It's a fascinating world, and we're glad you're with us to cover it. I'm Randy Tobler on Wake Up Missouri, along with Stephanie Bell, wearing her Wake Up Missouri shirt.
My merch this morning.
Your
Glad
merch,
you're back,
and John
Randy.
has his Wake Up, and I don't. What did I do?
Didn't get the memo.
Yeah, well, I don't know. My wife has it so cold in the house, I forget that it's summer, So
we're having this debate, like what the air should be on right now.
Oh, you do?
And I saw a funny, social media post last week, and it was like, if your thermostat is above 70, then why did you invite me to your terrarium? And I agree.
You agree with that? Okay,
Yeah.
good. We'll have a discussion. It sounds like a little bit later on in terms of men are
Halloween.
reptiles and women are marsupials or something. I don't know. We'll have to figure that out in terms of their temperature needs. Well,
Although it's
the other way around, right? Men like it warmer. I think they can
Correct.
tolerate it warmer, and the girls don't do so well in the. They like it cooler. Yeah.
Well,
Meanwhile, I look
in
at
the office, I get frozen out, and here I get frozen out. But it's going to rain and be cool the rest of the week.
It's going to be sort of funky all week. I hope the weather straightens out on the weekend. I don't think we know that yet. I think there's a small chance of change. But we will talk about the weather because I think that all throughout Missouri we're going to be threatened with up to 6-8 inches of rain. It just seems like one or another place in the area in Missouri is going to be getting flash flood warnings. And I tell you, Mother Nature is something as she rears her ugly head. The Intifada comes to Boulder, quiet little marijuana capital of the world, Boulder. And, anti-Semitic attacks, people being set on fire. I mean, this is like a mini Holocaust going on in the streets there. I have never seen anything. Well, I guess we talked about it. Maybe like the 60s. Maybe to me, it's like the 60s. I mean, I was a little kid then, but I remember the same kind of images, whether it was rioting in the streets or whether it was Kent State and the National Guard after, college kids that were acting like hooligans on campus. We are just in a time of near anarchy, near chaos. And it's just, you zoom out and you watch it and you go, wow, how are we going to get a control on this? Something's got to give. I think people look at this and they say, wait a minute. We've got to change this. Where are these kids' parents? Where is this Egyptian's, asylum hearing? There are so many questions unanswered about this. This guy was unabashed about it. He says, I wanted to kill as many as I could. Did you hear that? When he was talking with the officials there, John Marsh?
Said he'd been planning this for a year.
I know.
And literally lit people on fire. I mean, they were talking that some of these people's skin was melted off. I mean, just horrific violence.
A lot of the victims are very elderly as well.
I just
I think they said they range from 55 to 85. I mean, just
So there's just a ton of trouble in the world, and of course down in Jefferson City, we're going to continue to follow what happens there. Yesterday, it seems like a lot of bills were filed in the state Senate. Heard a little bit of the show yesterday. Thanks, Scott, for sitting in yesterday and hosting this program. I heard Nick Schroer talking about how he thought it was a pretty good session. It was good to hear that Nick formerly, I think, was on the side of the fence and he still is a very rabid conservative, and I think we could still consider him a Freedom Caucus guy, but seemed to have a lot of olive branch kind of talk going on from what I heard. Did I hear the right thing, Stephanie? I think so. At least compared to previous sessions.
There's a lot of talk happening.
A lot of talk happening, yeah.
Heard from Representative Rudy Veed, who didn't sound that optimistic about the whole thing.
Yeah, I know. Well, and
he's a supporter of Mike Keogh's stadium funding plan.
Well, and the Missouri Independent said, and it was interesting because I think it was fascinating to hear someone who, you might say his ox got gored in terms of his district not getting funded with some of the HB 19 projects, and yet maybe you could say, framing it one way, looking at the larger picture. Of course, accepting the argument that there's economic benefit, right, to the state. And that is the whole crux of the matter. Is there economic benefit or not? Patrick Tuohy has a big opinion piece in the Missouri Independent, citing a bunch of study after study after study. He's saying that the owners of the Royals and the Chiefs should come in and testify, give witness.
Well, they are having committee meetings, I believe. Yeah. I mean, yesterday it was a whole lot of nothing, but there were several bills filed. Apparently, the Democrats. We talked yesterday with Minority Leader Doug Beck. He's introduced a rules change that would change the threshold for the PQ. Randy, I'm sure you have thoughts on that. The previous question.
We need the PQ.
I guess Brad Hudson introduced some initiative petition reform legislation. Senator Weber, who covers Mizzou, wants to raise that because in the call, remember, they were calling for $25 million for the reactor here at Mizzou. It was $50 in HB 19, so he introduced something to raise that up to $50. So, I mean, there's a lot of still work to be done, and nothing really got done yesterday. But my understanding is today they'll go in and refer some of those bills, and they'll start their committee hearings.
Is that the same Senator Weber that disgraced himself when he went off on a tirade the other day? That Weber?
I don't know that he disgraced himself.
The yelling and the screaming and "you're a coward," he's calling another senator? Really? I mean, that.
Well, he was hoping that.
I thought this was the deliberative body.
Well, and I think he was hoping that.
Freshman senator coming off like that? No, that's not helpful.
Yeah, but I mean.
If you're listening, Senator Weber, you can do better than that. You can do better than that.
I think the Democrats thought they were within their rights within the Senate rules, and they were wanting the rules to be followed.
Well,
There's a disagreement, I think.
But you don't need to put on a tantrum like a kindergartner. I mean, you don't need to do that.
I mean, he wouldn't be the first.
Call a fellow senator a coward? I mean, really? And sort of, it looked small. Just looked small. That's just me. It looked small. But he served honorably in the military, and maybe that's just, that's that rage that comes out once in a while.
Well, I think it brings up a good point in that feelings are still pretty hot.
Oh, yeah, no doubt about it. Well, on another front, Senator Hawley was on the other day. You may have seen his tweet, said, and I'm quoting from a tweet from, what do you call a post on X now? It's not a tweet. What is it, just an X? What do you, just X?
It's still a tweet.
What's the verb you post something on X? I need my slang-o-matic.
Yeah.
Where's my slang-o-matic? I need that this morning.
Boomers are going to call it Twitter forever and tweets, and I don't know what. Drake, what does Gen Z call it?
What do you call?
Do you think we use X?
What do you use?
Not many people in my generation.
What do you use? Reddit?
No, no. Well, I mean, losers do. I mean, Instagram has like this Threads thing. It's kind of like an Instagram Twitter.
People are using Threads?
People use Threads. I'm very surprised.
Okay.
Yeah.
I thought that was like the Facebook failed answer to X.
Yeah, it was.
It was kind of like MySpace.
It never caught
I'll do some research.
On. So here's what Josh Hawley posted yesterday. Just had a great talk with President Trump about the big, beautiful bill. He said again, no Medicaid cuts. And then he's on Laura Ingram's show last night and talking about another thing. I mean, he had a very busy media day yesterday.
Yeah, and they also know that they hate Trump. I mean, that's the real thing, Laura. They know they hate Trump, so whatever Trump does must be bad. Trump is going to ruin the economy. Oh, oops, the economy's getting better. Trump is going to make things worse for working people. Oh, oops, when Trump was president last time, we had the best economy for blue-collar workers in my lifetime. And now, look what Trump is doing with the tariffs. He's seeing great success. And by the way, how about who really ruined the economy in the last 4 years? Joe Biden, this guy who was more interested in pronouns than he was in creating jobs.
Well, and he was on Hannity on Sunday saying that a Secret Service member leaked to him that Biden used to get lost in his closet, and they'd have to go retrieve him from the White House closet. Yeah. So he has had a busy couple of days.
Yeah, he's been busy, and
but he's right. I mean, we're expecting the jobs numbers out on Friday, Randy, and I think that, right. And I saw something yesterday about how people are expecting GDP to be positive.
Some of the economic fundamental indicators apparently that they look at, some of the predictors apparently are saying like GDP in the 4% range.
And we reported yesterday that egg prices are down like 60%. I mean, are you tired of winning yet?
I don't know, but one thing I'm also not tired of, I don't know, what is it about, I just love it when Scott Bessent or any one of the president's cabinet members just owns a media gal. or guy.
Listen to earnings calls just like we do.
A guy.
You know what Walmart's saying, what Best Buy's saying, and what Target are saying.
But Margaret, I also know what Home Depot and Amazon are saying. I know what the South China Morning Post wrote within the past 24 hours, that 65% of the tariffs will likely be eaten by the Chinese producer.
So when he owns a media personality, right, whether it's Margaret Brennan, who's one of my favorites because she was so rude in the debates. Remember that? I mean, she was just rude in the debates. Or whether it's, now who's the gal on NBC, it doesn't matter. I mean, they're pushing back, and it's good to see. I saw him push back on Joe Scarborough the other day. I forget who it was. I mean, they're not taking it sitting.
And the other thing is like it speaks to how well prepared they are because
Yes.
they're not just talking platitudes. They come in with real data, real facts, real information. And I think I'm so pleased with the picks and how they show up every day just ready to go on message with,
with facts.
Yeah, with real information. And I think if you were just to say, you're wrong, no, nuh-uh, it doesn't play the same way. And so the fact that, not only these people are really well prepared, but certainly they've got armies of staff who are prepping them on this stuff and giving them the data that they need to tell people what the right information is.
And just like Stephanie prepares for the daily DC rundown by reading the South China Post every morning and the Australian Down Under Gazette, Scott Bessent, the South China Post. I mean, I want that kind of a nerd. I want a guy that's reading the South China Post ahead of Treasury. That's the guy I want. I like that.
He's very good. Him and Stephen Miller had great interviews over the weekend, was really good and just on fire. So
They're ready. All right, we have lots to cover. Chris Arps at 6:35. We'll ask him about state and national issues. And Tom Crookmeyer is going to join us at 7:35, and he'll be in studio and talk with us about the budget, the state budget, what he predicts may or may not happen. And I want to ask him about what the uncertainty at the federal level with Medicaid and with SNAP benefits, what that's going to do to budget makers. And if he were now the budget director, would he be drinking heavily, taking Prozac? What would he be doing? I don't know. Just
we
kidding.
talked yesterday about what you should do if you're feeling overwhelmed.
Yeah. Something about Anheuser-Busch, I heard. Yeah.
No.
Oh, no.
That was
Make Missouri
Scott,
healthy
that
again.
Was Scott
that was
Bond's
Scott's
take.
advice. Not
The
your
Wall
advice.
Street Journal says you should just keep on trucking.
There you go. Keep on trucking. That's what we'll do on Wake Up Missouri. 573-874-9390. Join in.
You're listening to Wake Up Missouri.
aren't just burning American flags in our streets. They're now burning Americans in our streets.
Guy Benson nails it. Intifada in the streets. Here's Stephanie Bell with the Daily DC Rundown.
Mohammed Sabri Soliman was arrested for throwing Molotov cocktails at people attending this Boulder, Colorado demonstration. He has been charged with a federal hate crime after he told the police he'd do it again. And
I don't get it. I just don't get it.
It's really tough, and for law-abiding citizens, for people just exercising their First Amendment, for people visiting an embassy or working at an embassy in D.C. I was telling you, Randy, off air, I've got Jewish friends in D.C. who have kids. I have other Jewish friends who send their kids to Jewish schools, right? And for those parents, I think of all the stuff going on.
Think of Hasidic Jews. Think of yarmulke wearing guys.
It's overwhelming.
Can't walk down the street without wondering if you're going to get attacked.
It's awful. It is
unbelievable.
Awful. So he has been charged with the federal hate crime. I hope somebody lights him
now.
on
Can
fire.
we finally agree that this may be the time for a public execution with the same thing he did? Can we finally agree it's time? I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Eye for eye, tooth for tooth, burn for burn. Sorry.
I'm down for
domestic terrorists, yeah.
Yeah, I can do that for an Egyptian. I'm down for that.
All right. Moving along, Trump is expected to meet with President Xi Jinping. They are supposed to speak this week, maybe not an in-person meeting, after talking about, to talk about trade. And so maybe we are, so interesting development. You think they're actually going to talk, Randy? What do you think?
A lot of talk. These guys, Gigi and Vladimir, are pretty smart. They're wily and they're evil.
China's Ministry of Commerce said that if we continued this behavior, China would, quote, take resolute and forceful measures to safeguard its legitimate rights and interests, whatever that means.
But Scott Bessent just told Margaret Brennan that they're eating 65% of the tariffs. So those businesses have to stay in business over there. So they're going to take a little haircut, right? If they want to do business with Merca.
I think so.
All the time planning to invade Taiwan in 2027.
Yeah, and
exactly.
Cut the undersea cables for communications. Yeah.
All right. Trump is also posting to Truth Social. We talked earlier. What do we call Truth Social posts? Truths?
Truth. The truth.
The truth. I don't know that this is the truth or not, but he's saying he wants that big, beautiful bill on his desk by 4th of July. Oh, that's looking unlikely, Randy.
Not the way the senators' holdouts are standing.
The Senate is back in. Of course, Randy, you played some, talked about Hawley earlier, saying there wouldn't be any Medicaid cuts. That's, of course, a point of contention, especially as we see the numbers for the deficit, but also this SALT increase, the SALT deduction, is one big point of contention, which, of all of the things, why is that one of the major I don't know why that's one of the major sticking points. But again, if you're, if you have anything you want, we have so few votes to play with that they basically have to give you, you can hold out and get what you want.
It's a sad reality, right? It's a pragmatic reality. If you want to get the tax cuts extended and the defense and the border, you got to give on this, right?
Right.
That's what they're saying.
So House Republicans agreed to raise that cap from 10,000 up to 40,000, and so we'll see how that plays out in the Senate. Of course, there's a lot of pressure for the Senate to just take what the House did. That way, and Johnson's talked about it. He said this was a really strategically done deal, and if you move any of the pieces, it might all fall apart.
Sort of like a house of cards, like
what's happening in the state legislature right now. Yeah.
No, really, when these things are so craftily negotiated, you dislodge one piece and the whole thing falls, right? Potentially,
it could. But Trump says he wants it by July 4th. So I don't know. Trump's been chalking up some ways.
And he's going to throw his political weight around, remember? He's going to throw his political weight around. So.
He is. He's also asked the courts, I guess, yesterday for an immediate appeal on this federal worker issue.
ARP's coming up in 6:35. Stay tuned.
Has America been fair to Donald Trump? The people always know
Chris Arps gets as much delight out of President Trump's cabinet members handling the media as they have so aptly done as I do. Chris Arps, welcome into the program.
Good morning. How are you today?
I'm good. What do you think of that? Are you getting Stephanie and I were talking earlier about how it's just fun to watch these great communicators backed up by facts. We played a clip where he referenced, he read Margaret, I read the South China Post this morning. Did you? You know what they're saying? You know, China's going to eat most of the tariffs. Isn't it fun to watch these media people that formerly just owned cabinet members?
Yeah,
right?
Are you tired of winning yet, Chris?
What do you think?
I do. You know, one of the criticisms against Republican presidents and Republican politicians is they don't know how to fight, and the media seems to get the best of them. And until Donald Trump became president, the last Republican president that I remember that really gave it to the media was Ronald Reagan. Other than that, you had George W. Bush, who couldn't speak English very well, couldn't communicate very well. The media ate him alive.
Yep.
So it's great to see President Trump and his cabinet members give it back to the media the way they've been giving it to us for all these years.
Yeah, it's just really good to see. On another front, go ahead.
Yeah. Hey, Chris, talk to us about how the tornado recovery is going in St. Louis. What's it look like on the ground, and what are you hearing? I mean, I know in special session, the governor said we're going to do some sort of relief. I think the Democrats have said it's really not that much money when it comes to, in the grand scheme of things, and it's not enough to get people back to where they were. But I heard a number yesterday, more than 3,000 homes just destroyed. Yeah, it's just a very slow process. I mean, I never realized how many trees there are in St. Louis and North St. Louis and in Forest Park, where there was a lot of damage also. I mean, when trees and limbs and stuff come down, it takes a lot of time and effort to clean all of that stuff up. So it's just a very slow process. The city, of course, is waiting for funds from FEMA and from the federal government. There's talk. I think the mayor said that she's going to use some of the COVID money or some of the RAMS money to help with the cleanup. But it's just a slow process, and it's going to be a while before things kind of get somewhat back to normal. I can give you an example. My house didn't have really a lot of damage, my neighborhood, but my power line between my house and the pole is down. The wires are literally going from my house across my lawn up to the pole. Becky called Ameren and then told them, hey, these lines are here. Are they okay? Are they safe? They said they are. But it's going to be a while before we can get out there and take care of that because there's so many other pressing needs.
Wow!
So my power line is lying in my backyard.
Don't go out on your bare feet there on a wet day.
That's scary.
I won't.
Wow!
I will not do that.
So now I'm hearing that in Chris's neighborhood there are downed trees, and I'm thinking, given this politically charged, very polarized atmosphere, might be a good time, Chris, for you to get your chainsaw out and do some cathartic, very, kind of work. What do you say? Get the chainsaw out. It's very releasing to cut trees apart. No? You're going to get out there and do that?
It is. You know what? We had a tree came down about 5 years ago. Actually, it was during the Michael Brown situation in 2014. And we ended up buying a little chainsaw. And wow. You get a lot of testosterone using a chainsaw. Yeah. That's the first time that I ever used it before.
Man.
And
you come out to the Liberty Lair, my farm, and we'll do some chainsawing. I had to clear a path after some storms just a few weeks ago, and man, I came in. I told I was up all night. I couldn't get to sleep. It was like a manic moment. Something about chainsaw and burning grass. I don't love it.
There's a whole social media aspect and like place for people who enjoy lumberjacks.
Oh man,
we got to come out to the place. I want to go chainsaw and then go shoot. That would be the ultimate weekend.
We'll do that, man. We'll do that. It's my place is highly fenced, well bunkered, and highly armed, brother. I'm telling you. Okay. So on another note, what are we going to do about the intifada that has come to the streets of America? A governor's mansion with the Jewish family in the upper level burned. Then we have a couple of people working at the Israeli embassy executed in cold blood. Then we have, of course, literally the burning of a dozen or more Jewish people in Boulder. Where are we going with this, Chris?
Well, I think the first thing that we need to do is ask the question, why are we hearing from the squad members and other prominent members of the Democratic Party who seem to support Hamas. Where are the condemnations of these acts of violence? I'm not seeing a lot of them. I think that's where it starts first. And I also love the fact, and I just, the media's not reporting on this stuff. I just found out a couple of days ago that the assailant who killed the 2 Israeli embassy employees, he was an illegal alien too. I had no idea until like a couple of days ago. And then we learned that this person who killed did the firebombing, he is an Egyptian national who overstayed his visa as well. So, the immigration issue, deportation, it's a 90-10 issue. And I think it's going to be even more higher than that because of these 2 instances of illegals being in our country and causing harm.
Chris, you and your afternoon show partner in St. Louis, former state... Tim Jones, our former Speaker of the Missouri House. What's Tim's take? What's your take on where stadium funding is headed? We had Cole County Rep Rudy Veed on and said a lot of that bad blood and injured egos over the capital improvements bill not going anywhere could play a role.
Well, I read some stuff on Missouri Scout, and he had some speculation on how the stadium bill could be done if some of the other factions that are against it get some things. I was hearing, I think he wrote about how if IP reform and some other things that the Freedom Caucus want, if they can get some promises on that, that they may have their votes. I don't know. I just think in this climate, asking for subsidies for stadiums, I just don't think it's going to fly. And like I said last week, I don't think the governor will lose a lot of sleep if this bill doesn't pass. I think he has to do this. He doesn't want to be the governor that was in office when the Chiefs and the Royals left Missouri, and he didn't do everything in his power to try to save them. I think it's that more than anything, but this is not a popular proposal.
Speaking from the St. Louisan perspective, Chris, I think you and I both can say I remember vividly when the St. Louis Rams won the Super Bowl. I was there. I played in the band at the stadium.
1999.
Took care of some of the players' wives in my practice. And I remember the fervor, the excitement. Everyone was just, it was manic about the Rams. They were gone. They were gone a decade later, right? And I wonder if that's maybe what's informing of some people, even though the Royals and the Chiefs and people, I heard Scott Fawn say yesterday, after all, it's a team that's winning. Well, year before last they won. Last year they barely won. What if they start losing? I think that history may inform some of this conversation. What do you think?
I just hope that people really look at the history of the Rams situation and see what it really was, and that for the last 7 or 8 years the Rams were in St. Louis. Stan Kroenke purposely put a crappy team on the field so that people wouldn't show up, and then he could say St. Louis doesn't support the Rams and could move that team out to L.A. and make billions. You look at the last 7 or 8 years, they were drafting horribly. They weren't putting good players. They weren't trying to acquire good players. They intentionally sabotaged that team so that St. Louis wouldn't support it. That's not the case in Kansas City, of course. I think it's kind of two different situations.
Well, it isn't the case now, but things happen. Owners change. The world changes. And I guess it's just, Patrick Tuohy from Show Me Institute has a very interesting piece in the Missouri Independent talking about one after another real-life example where it hasn't worked out well. And then, of course, academic studies that net, there's not an economic benefit. I understand the qualitative excitement and the pride, and you can't put a number on that. I get that. But, there's a lot on the other side.
Well, and zooming out from that, it almost seems to get into a debate of, is this the effect of term limits? Because how many people in that Capitol building remember the history, right? Know the history, know what it's, know what a special session is like, have been through some of these things. And I think in some ways, I think having more people who had more respect for the institution or who knew the history, we might be able to have a more productive session. I think that's a struggle we're having right now.
Well, Chris, you can relate. The fans have a long memory. We're sitting here talking about the Rams pulling out of the dome at America's Center, but heck, you can relate. I can relate to how upset the fans were in St. Louis when Bill Bidwell pulled the football Cardinals out and went to Arizona.
Yep.
Yeah, and what just upsets me is that St. Louis gets this reputation of not supporting teams. When you look at the Cardinals for years, they were having 3 million fans in a mid-sized city. How remarkable that was! And Sporting News at one time, just about 10 years ago, named St. Louis the best sports city. St. Louis is a great sports city. Unfortunately, the NFL owners that we have don't respect the citizens of St. Louis and put a good and try to keep a good team on the field, so they move to greener pasture.
Well, look at the support that you guys have put forward for the Battlehawks, right? Like that's
Battlehawks,
yeah. I mean, that's been hugely successful.
I mean, they're putting 30,000 people into the dome for a XFL game. I mean, all of the championship is going to be in St. Louis because this is where all the people the most
there you go.
The most popular,
yeah. Well, it's going to be an interesting battle, and at the end of the day, will there be mental institutions that won't be built? Will there be training facilities that won't be funded or restored or built? Will there be nuclear reactors for medical research and diagnostics and therapeutics that won't be done? It's interesting to see. We'll see.
We'll have great Sundays, though.
You're right.
Chris, before we let you go, I need to know, what's your thermostat set on?
Oh, yeah, we've been having that discussion.
That's interesting. I'm not allowed to touch it. So
okay.
What's the thermostat on?
Yeah, it sounds like this is a constant theme.
Comfortable.
We play a little game. I by day I turn it up a little bit, and by night it's like igloo temperature in our house. It's
wonderful.
Becky and I are the exact opposites. I'm very cold nature. She's always warm, so we have battles.
Well, she is warm, but you're warm when you join us as a guest on Wake Up Missouri. Thank you, Chris. At Chris _Arps. We'll talk to you next week. All right. There he is. Yeah, it sounds like that's a little reverse of what I think is the usual. I don't know. When we come back, do you think that homeschool athletes are going to be able to try out for public school teams? We'll ask the question. Stay tuned.
This is Wake Up Missouri.
Any of you either homeschool or have homeschooled one or more of your children, or maybe you know someone who does. I have a lot of friends, and a lot of my friends at our church homeschool.
Our afternoon show, Elijah Haar
Right.
at KWTO was a homeschool kid.
And I think he was one of the original, along the way, sponsors of the homeschool kids trying out for public school teams and I guess other extracurriculars. There's a bill that's been filed, since 2014, John? And now finally it was passed this session, but it's on the governor's desk and he hasn't signed it yet. I don't know if he's going to I guess if he doesn't sign it, it goes into effect if he doesn't sign it by July something, right? July 15th, I think.
I think that's right. Obviously a lot of action happened in the last few weeks of session. The dust up that occurred in the legislature last week was the ceremonial signing of many of those bills that got passed toward the end. And so the governor has a lot on his desk, right?
And Elijah was the original one who introduced this in 2014. He's, of course, from our great KWTO listening area in Springfield, homeschool student himself who went on, of course, to become Speaker of the Missouri House. And he participated in a homeschool league. So they do have leagues, and my nephews did that in St. Louis, and they had like an art fair and everything.
Yeah, if you're in a highly populated area, typically there's some sort of group or somebody that kind of organizes that. But if you're in a more rural area, which I think a lot of people take advantage of homeschooling in rural areas, you don't have
There's not the volume of homeschoolers to put together a league.
Exactly. So allowing them to participate in sports, and I think we can all appreciate the lessons you learn in playing organized sports.
The homeschool league in Brunswick and Salisbury would have 2 people on either side of the line, right? Right, Drake? I mean, it would be a small league.
Yeah, well, one of my great friends, he was homeschooled until high school, and he was a stud athlete.
Yep.
Is a stud athlete. He went to college
like Marsh.
Yeah, like Marsh. But the most notable person I can think of that was able to play during while he was homeschooled was Tim Tebow. He was homeschooled throughout high school.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, he was, and now you know where his legacy lies. I mean, he was a stud at Florida, and just imagine if that wasn't able to happen. We wouldn't have Tim Tebow.
Okay, well, there you go. I just think it's interesting, and I think it would open up new opportunities for homeschool kids if they could try out and for extracurricular activities. Maybe they could.
I know when Congress testified on this one, if I'm not mistaken, Simone Biles was one of those homeschooled athletes who testified about it on the federal level.
Well, and many people who enter athletics, like I would think gymnastics, where they have to practice, if you're an Olympian, you practice 8 hours a day, they end up, having to be homeschooled because of their training schedules.
But at the same time, it's equipment heavy, right, in terms of training.
And I haven't read the actual language of the bill. I wonder, are there opportunities for them to participate in things like choir or band or speech and debate or something?
Well, the story says that they can participate in
MISHA-sponsored activities, right?
Expanding extracurricular opportunities, sports teams and other activities beginning in August.
Good.
This is according to Annalise Hanshaw's report in the Missouri Independent. So, I mean, think about it. If you're a kid you're paying your property taxes, right? So and you're supporting the school, I would think you ought to be able to participate in some of those activities.
The big point of contention on this, as I remember, was the House changed some of the wording about potential background checks of homeschooling families who were getting tax funded, rebates for their kid and all. And it was a close one, but it's with the governor's signature, it'll be letter of the law.
Yeah. And if he doesn't, I can't imagine him vetoing it. I can't imagine Mike Kehoe vetoing it.
I don't think so.
So I just didn't know if you knew this was out there, folks. In the Wake Up family, it might be an opportunity. If that's something that's held you back, that your child is really avid about sports but wouldn't have an opportunity because maybe you live in a smaller area where there's not that homeschool league.
Well, yeah, and I don't think there's an emergency clause, so presumably it would go into effect at the end of August, potentially affecting kids in the next school year.
Yeah, so it would have impact. All right, hey, we're going to step aside when we come back. Some great polling out for the GOP. More on Wake Up Missouri, 708.
World Headquarters. This is Wake Up Missouri with Stephanie Bell, the Zimmer News Team, and your host, Randy Tobler.
After all of the waves, Kate Baldwin, after the last few months, the first 5 months of the Donald Trump presidency, right, the first 4 months of the Donald Trump presidency, that you expect that Democrats would have this massive lead on the economy. It ain't so. It ain't so. The party that is closest to your economic views, in November of 2023, it was the Republicans by 11 points. Now it's still within that range, still within that margin of error. Plus 8-point advantage for the Republican Party. How is that possible, Democrats? How is that possible after all the recession fears, after the stock market's been doing all of this, after all the tariffs that Americans are against, and Republicans still hold an 8-point lead on the economy? Are you kidding me?
Well, that was Harry Enton on CNN commenting on how despite the uncertainty, despite the roller coasters, despite the 401ks in the tanks and then they're coming back, despite the AI threats and all the other, people trust in Trump. And in the GOP. Welcome into Wake Up Missouri. I'm Randy Tobler along with Stephanie Bell, John Marsh, and Drake Whitman. I think it's fascinating. Normally we think of that honeymoon period, Stephanie, as the first 100 days, right? Got to get it done in 100 days. He's still having staying power with his political capital.
Well, and I forget who texted in yesterday because we were talking about the economy and how long does Trump have to really right the ship? And one of our listeners said, hey, we survived 4 years of the Biden economy, remember? And so I think it's much like, in my mind, it's much like polling where sure, the numbers aren't really maybe exactly where we want them to be yet, but at least they're trending in the right direction. So I think people still have a lot of optimism. And I think those numbers, we're going to have to see Trump put up some big numbers. Again, we're expecting the jobs report out later this week, that, he's going to have to back it up. But right now, it at least feels like we're swinging in the right direction. And I think
you're right.
And so I think he still gets a lot of credit for that.
And I think too, it's about the optimistic hope that the rhetoric gives, right? It's like they keep reminding us, hey, we didn't get to this point with a $34 trillion debt and, $2 trillion deficits. We didn't get here overnight. It's not going to turn around overnight. But here's our goal. And yeah, when you're going after an ambitious goal, you're going to have some fits and starts. But look at what we're doing with the border. Check, right? Look at the deportations of some of these gang members, despite what the courts are doing.
Check. And look at what we did with USAID.
Yeah.
Check.
Right. And so, you're seeing.
Well, Elon did his interview with CBS over the weekend and said, well, I'm not taking credit for all of this. And that's where they clipped the thing about it can be big or beautiful, but not both. But with his Occupy Mars T-shirt on.
Yeah. Now, that was a CNN poll. Now, remember, in November of 23, inflation was, really still running pretty wild, and Trump's numbers were coming up as he was, announcing and doing his run. So it went from a 12% to an 8%, positive for the GOP. And again, I keep saying Trump, but I think Trump being the absolute leader and determiner of what happens, in the GOP, certainly he's carrying the water at this point. But here's even a better poll or a different poll with better numbers.
If it was just this one CNN poll, that would be one thing. But take a look at Reuters Ipsos. What do we see here? Party with a better economic plan. Well, in May of 2024, just before Donald Trump was reelected president, Republicans had a 9-point advantage. Look at where we are now in May of 2025. The advantage actually went up by 3 points. Now Republicans have a 12-point advantage when it comes to the party with a better economic plan. And again, this is after months of supposed economic uncertainty in which the stock market's been going bonkers, in which the tariff wars that Americans are against have been going on. And yet, despite all of that, the Democrats are down by 12 points on the economy. This speaks to Democratic problems on the economy better than basically anything that you could possibly look at. The Republicans still hold an advantage on the all-important key issue of the day, which is the...
Okay, now, so on all of the polling that I've seen, except for health care, on all the other issues, the GOP still has pretty substantial margins, right? And they're underwater by about 10 or 12 points, depending on the poll on health care. And I understand that. Healthcare is just a disaster right now. You pay so much and you don't get any time, and access is terrible. I mean, it's awful. Okay, so I understand that. But now, so then you take all of those little granular metrics and you apply it to the whole transformation of the Republican Party. It is not the same Republican Party. Who owned the middle class for decades? The Democrats.
Yeah, the
Listen to
class.
this.
Party of the middle class has been a huge advantage for Democrats. I have polling from NBC going all the way back since 1989 when Democrats had a 23-point advantage. 2016, a 17-point advantage. But by this decade, we already started seeing declines back in 2022 where you saw that Democrats led, but only by 4 points, well within the margin of error. And now in our latest CNN poll among registered voters, which is the party of the middle class, it is tied. This, I think, speaks to Democratic ills more than anything else. They have traditionally been the party of the middle class. No more.
Why? Because they saw their jobs go to China, to Indonesia, to India, to everywhere else.
Yeah, I mean, there's been a massive realignment amongst the parties, and, you know, Trump's populism has really, I mean, and he's done a masterful job in kind of saying that the Democrats are now the party of the elites, and I'm here for the everyday person, and, you know, the everyday people showed up in November to vote for Trump. I think going back to the previous clip you played, Randy, when we talk about economic plans and why, you know, folks are siding with the Republicans, I'd have to ask, like, what is the Democrats' economic plan? I don't know. I couldn't articulate. Like, I don't know what it is. And I think right now, you know, who is going to be the next leader of the Democrat Party? I think that is a huge question. You know, there are so many differing views in that party right now. No one has kind of emerged as, you know, who's going to be their front runner in 2028 or whatever. And so I think they have massive problems, starting with leadership and starting with the fact that they don't have a plan. Kamala threw all these random new plans out there. They didn't work for her, and I don't know what their plan is now.
Well, I know what their plan is.
You do?
Called out on this because I called Donald Trump a wannabe dictator. It's because he is. It's because he is.
So, Orange Man bad, dictator, Hitler, right? Okay, that's plan one.
The governor's being mean, and the governor's speaking out on that. Well, maybe it's time for us to be a little meaner. Maybe.
So now they're going to be mean. Every other word's going to be the F word, right? And somehow they think that's going to garner votes and that's going to garner support when their policies have failed the very people they claim to help.
I mean, and you can criticize Obama, but he was a policy heavy guy. His hope and changey, whatever he did, you know, he actually had ideas. And so I think whether you're talking about the federal government or whether we're talking about what's going to happen in the state legislature, just being anti one person or being a no doesn't mean that you have a competing idea that's worth people getting behind. And right now, Democrats are lacking ideas and policy that people can get behind.
Yeah, I think you nailed it. I mean, they just are they're lost for meaningful ideas that connect and engage everyday people like you and me and the Wake Up family. Right? We don't. I mean, I don't really care about, you know, how many marchers we have in the Gay Pride Parade during June month. You know, I don't care about that. That's not what's important to me.
I understand about how much the eggs are when you go to the grocery store.
Yeah, that's right. And you know, I care about whether I can walk down the street and make sure that there's not some MS-13 gang member that's going to be there to assault me. Or if I'm Jewish, I'm worried that I want some safety. They're finally addressing, the Republicans are finally addressing the issues that are so important to people, and that for the sake of all these social fringe issues have been sacrificed by the Democrat Party, and they're lost in the wilderness. I mean, there's no other way to put it right now.
Yet last week you told us they were spending $40,000 on a study on how to talk to men.
I told them they could just. It was $40 million.
Oh, $40 million.
I told them they could send a couple million your way, and you and Jen Bukowski could probably tell them, you know, get my wife, you and Jen and my daughters in the room. I bet for $1 million, you guys would give them a little focus group, wouldn't you?
I got it. Yeah.
And I think if they listen, they'd probably get it, right? They'd probably get it. So I don't know. It's fun to watch. It's tragic to watch, though, that there's still a large number of people, some of whom listen to the program and text us, that still think that that's somehow the answer, that somehow embracing these fringe ideas making this a part of our children's school curriculum, CRT and, LGBTQ stuff. It's like, really? No, guys, look, I'm not castigating aspersions on these people. That's not the point. I'm not castigating them or casting aspersions. But I want to get onto the important things that government should be responsible for, right?
You want people to just play baseball. We talked to Senator Schroer yesterday, and I guess he took issue with the fact that the Royals put out some Pride post for Pride Month. And he said, look, like when I'm taking my family to the baseball game, I don't, like, why are we talking about any kind of straight, gay, sex, anything at all? Like, I just want to, let's just play baseball. Like, eat a hot dog, drink a beer, play baseball. Like, let's have those.
I don't know.
Like, what are we doing here?
Well, look who the potential front runner is for the presidential nomination from the Democratic Party, Pete Buttigieg.
Chest feeding Pete. Chest feeding Pete.
And tampon
28 isn't that far away, folks.
Now, Bruce, getting back to some serious matters when it comes back to setting thermostat temperature, because that is the question of the day. How are the thermostat wars working out in your household? Bruce has some advice for the guys. Just tell your wife. He says we keep it at 76, 75, usually around 76. And as the summer gets hotter, we bump it to 77 or so. He says, Bruce. Tell my wife, this is Bruce. Where are you sleeping tonight, brother? I just tell my wife to go outside for a while and come back in, and it feels like an icebox. They have a big garden. They spend a lot of time getting hot outside. So, of course, 76 feels pretty good when it's 100 degrees out, right?
Yeah, I do think as the summer goes on, you can regulate a little bit. But, that says 78.
But what is it? Is this just my wife's thing, or is it a girl thing? She likes it really cold in the room, but then like the weighted blanket or the heavy. What is that all about? Why do you make the room like an igloo? Then you wear 10 layers of flannel stuff. I don't get it.
It's the best way to sleep.
Back with Make Missouri Healthy again. Speaking of sunscreen and the hot summer, you won't want to miss what's coming up at 7:25.
You're listening
Time to keep Missouri healthy again. This time it's about your skin.
My skin.
I was talking to my friend Chris Ann, who has just started the One Facial over there next to Chris McDee's in Columbia. Really great place. Can't wait for Helene to try it out. They just opened. She says you won't believe the amount of photo damage we're seeing in younger people. Mostly women are coming in there. But it's not just about photo damage from sun exposure and too much of it, too early, too long. It's about skin cancer. We see rising rates of skin cancer. It is the most common cancer, of course. And it turns out that, sunscreens and the ones that you choose are important. Not only that it's effective, obviously, but that it's not maybe harming you a little bit. So David Andrews, who's the chief science officer at the Environmental Working Group, a consumer organization, has some thoughts about the sunscreen you might want to use this summer. They produced their annual sunscreen guide since 2007. The 25 version of the sunscreen guide lists the best baby and child sunscreens, including those with the best bang for the buck, the best lip balms, the top recreational sunscreens. They said they looked at 500 products that they are recommending consumers seek out. Want people to wear sunscreen and at the same time recognize there's other ways to protect their skin. So wearing wide-brimmed hats. I have a little hat that looks like, what would you call it? It's a long-billed hat. Sort of looks like a whaler hat. You know what I mean? It's got the thing that covers your neck.
So like a surf caster's hat with a long bill on it, right?
Yes, I like that because as a young guy, I didn't do that. I spent a lot of time fishing the Missouri streams in southern Missouri, the Cotaway and the Huzaw and, Jack's Fork. And I didn't do that. And it shows, right? I've got a lot of precancers, those little actinic keratosis I'm always zapping off one way or another. So UV radiation has UVA, UVB, and you have to make sure and get a screen that's good with both of them. But here's the other thing. These sunscreens that are chemical only are the ones I try to avoid, and they're the most popular ones. You'll see things like oxybenzone and other, just chemical names on them. You know what I like to use if I'm going to use a sunscreen? They make fun of me. Zinc oxide or titanium oxide, yes.
Those are what they call the mineral sunscreens,
the mineral
right?
sunscreens, and this is the one. Chemical sunscreens are designed to soak into the skin, and there's a chemical reaction that absorbs the UV light. Now, look, we've been spending a lot of time since RFK has come on the scene about food dyes and artificial this and emulsifier that and different toxins and artificial chemicals. What about a chemical you slather all over your body? It absorbs into your skin, which has a blood supply, and then you bake it a little bit. Oh, isn't that nice?
Or it's
then you reapply it and do it over again,
the
right?
aerosol that you're inhaling.
Yeah, you're inhaling the aerosol. Take a big whiff, vape that chemical spray-on copper tone for a little bit, right? So I'm just saying, I tend to prefer testing released in 2019 by the FDA, 7 chemical ingredients: avobenzone, oxybenzone, octocrylene, ecamsul, homosalate, octosalate, and octinoxate were absorbed from the skin into the bloodstream after a single day of use. The concentration of 7 chemicals in the blood increased each day after application. They were 2 of the chemicals were still above safety levels at 1 week? No. 2 weeks? 3 weeks later.
So what do we do? Zinc?
Look like Casper the Ghost and put the white stuff on. I'm sorry.
You. No, thank
Big jar of nose coat. Isn't that what they used to call it?
You bet it. I'm telling you.
I'm with you. In my old age, you won't really find me outside without a hat on because I am very careful about my face.
Oxybenzone has been linked to lower testosterone levels. That's the problem, Drake. In adolescent boys, hormone changes in men. Just kidding you. Are you in there vaping sunscreen?
Yeah.
Is Hansen putting vape in his mix now?
Yeah, he is. He is now.
Putting sunscreen from the inside?
He's huffing that nitrous oxide.
Look, just beware that we're probably doing a large experiment on ourselves by slathering up with this stuff.
And especially with kids. Yeah. Like, it was a worry of mine. Like, I'm putting this on a tiny little baby.
Yeah. Buy the baby stuff and, look like Casper the Ghost. Your skin will thank you for it. That'll keep your skin.
Lynn says there's sheer zinc.
What?
Yeah, so you don't look like Casper the Ghost.
There you go. Back with Tom Krugmeyer at 7:35.
I think just local news is like
apply anyway. They just pass supplementals and spend the money anyway. But that's another thought. We're blessed to have Tom Kruckmeyer with us, former state budget director in Missouri, and he's in studio with John. John, I know you and Tom go back a long way. I think we need to ask Tom, when you watch what's going on, Tom, at the state level, well, maybe at all, what does that tell you about the current situation and polarization politically and how it applies to these kinds of matters as opposed to 5, 10, 15, 20 years ago?
Well, it's an interesting question. As I mentioned, that I've been kind of working on this sports stadium and subsidy issue for 40 years, or I've had some, professional involvement in it. And I think to answer your question, I think what I find interesting about this is that the politics are different because they're not strictly red versus blue. I mean, there are, obviously both Democrats and Republicans supporting stadiums, others do not. And there's a lot of moving parts to this. And, of course, there's always going to be, debates over budgets and whether or not money's well spent on this. But there's a common denominator here, and that's that, locale states and localities want to have professional sports teams for a variety of good or maybe not so good reasons. And we've come to the point where nearly all new or renovated baseball and football stadiums are built, at least in part, with public revenues. And that's where I think a lot of the controversy stems from. Now, let me say this about the politicians. I know it's a little rare possibly for somebody to express empathy or sympathy, but I really think the political leaders here, and Governor Kehoe on down, are kind of caught in the middle on this. They probably, realize that the economics of this aren't really that compelling, but they don't want to be, we don't want to lose the Chiefs on my watch and that sort of thing. And then you have the government in Kansas, willing to kind of play the foil here and make some offers. And that's what we've seen over the years, that's where the disputes come from. And that hadn't changed too much.
Tom, talk to us. And we've brought up in recent discussions on the air, going all the way back to the days of Bill Bidwell pulling football Cardinals out and heading to Arizona, and then Stan Kroenke taking the Rams back to L.A., Southern California, and all kind of a goes around, comes around fear for a lot of folks.
Well, that's right. And that's kind of how I got involved in this. I'm from St. Louis and was a former season ticket holder for the team we today call the Arizona Cardinals, and I got involved in trying to estimate their economic worth when it became apparent they were thinking about moving. And that was a first example of, in this case, Phoenix outbidding, I guess, the St. Louis area to do this. But then now that we're seeing kind of a similar thing, we also saw back in 2006 when the baseball Cardinals had a new stadium built, in part with public dollars. I mean, this issue's been around a while, and it kind of gets into the what is the actual economic worth of a team. And there, I think there's a lot of, let me be polite here, misinformation or exaggeration of the actual economic worth, and there's a lot of reasons for that. I'd be happy to elaborate on if you like.
So we're, approaching special session here. One thing that's on the table is this HB 19 capital improvements bill. I think the price tag originally was somewhere in the $400 to $600 million range. I think the sports stadium is in the $900 million range. I think the reason why the House said that they didn't take up HB 19 was that they wanted to leave some on the bottom line, that they felt, I guess, unsure, we needed to, have some extra just in case or something, right? We didn't need to be spending that much money. On the Senate side, I think the argument was, we've collected this money from taxpayers. We have the reserve we need. This is just money that's sitting in the bank. So how, it's rude to take Randy's tax money and not invest it or put it to work. Who's right?
Well, in my opinion, it's important to spend money on capital improvements. And as a veteran budget watcher, I can tell you that in lean budget years, a lot of capital improvements, maintenance, renovations, and those things have not been adequately funded. And I think that's probably also true in local school districts. So a good point here, I think, would be that if the state and or local governments do not spend money on improving or rebuilding stadiums, there's plenty of other capital improvements, similar things that need doing, which would in turn employ construction workers and the resources needed to do this. So I think it's a valid point that, okay, if we decided not to go forward with stadium renovations, this money would still be spent just as productively within the economy for things that, arguably are more beneficial and compelling projects.
Is there room in the budget, though, to do both? I mean,
that's a good question. And I'm glad you asked that, because this kind of gets into my actual area of expertise, and that's the big picture revenue situation and outlook. And let's talk about that, because that's pretty important. After the surge in revenues from the COVID relief, state general revenue has been, or the rate of growth has been declining. In the current year we're in, it's it's about flat with last year, and only grew about 1.4% last year. It's been a big drop-off, and that is in part because the state has cut its income tax rate, and there's other reasons. But looking at the revenue outlook, there's no getting around the fact that it's pretty grim by virtue of the fact we're not going to have revenue growth this year of any consequence, and the forecast for next year is for positive 1.6, but that I would think is no longer operational simply because the state has already passed a pretty large tax cut. The main feature of it is the exemption of capital gains from the state income tax. And this bill, which I presume the governor is going to sign, has a fiscal note of about $430 million for next fiscal year, and that is an ongoing tax cut. So, and then I don't know if we really want to start fiddling with what's going on the Washington side, but we know that some of the tax cuts that are certainly being considered would be negative for state revenues by exempting overtime, taxes on tips. That these work their way through to the state tax system. Plus, there's discussions of eliminating or making a deduction for auto loan interest. I mean, all the things that are being considered or are already in the kitty, you might say, are all things that would make the state revenue situation pretty difficult. And it's already going in the wrong direction, in my opinion.
Tom, let me play a little devil's advocate with you, because you have mentioned in a couple of ways that decreasing taxes will decrease revenue. I think that assumes that the Laffer curve is not operative, right? That you're not going to increase economic activity, and by increasing if you sell more hamburgers at a 10% discount, but you sell 20% more hamburgers, you're still having more gross revenue, right? So, same way with tax cuts, at least that's what Art Laffer says.
Well, on that subject, I have to respectfully disagree with Dr. Laffer, and let's be a little more specific here. When you're talking cutting taxes at the federal level, that's a completely different animal than cutting them at the state level. The federal government can cut taxes, not reduce spending, which they do, because the federal government can borrow money and does. But at the state level, that doesn't work that way. Missouri has to have a balanced budget, and if the state cuts taxes, taxpayers may have more money, but the state would have less money to spend on capital improvements, teacher salaries, adequate staffing in mental facilities, and you could go on and on. So at the state level, the idea that you cut taxes and get more revenue is not supported by empirical facts by virtue of the fact that states have to balance their operating.
So you don't get more businesses coming in and hiring more people, and therefore you have more people even though they're paying at a lower rate?
Well, not necessarily. Now, I know there's a whole body of interest in saying, we cut taxes, more businesses will come to the state. But as your friends at the Show Me Institute would probably back me up on this, that cutting taxes may in some cases be beneficial to business attraction, but it's certainly not a sure thing. Yeah. And other states, of course, are competing with Missouri for these things. And I'd also point out that taxes in general in Missouri are already rock bottom. I mean, it's hard to imagine we're going to move to Missouri because the taxes are lower there. Well, or in the case of a business already here, we're going to leave Missouri because the taxes are too high. Missouri already has very attractive tax climate.
Gotcha.
Tom, I guess the bottom line question is, and we're about out of time, if the Royals and the Chiefs both relocate to Overland Park or Shawnee Mission and all, is there a big revenue loss for the state of Missouri, or those dollars just move across to the other side of the metro?
Well, yeah, I think that's another point that hasn't been talked about much here. I think we have a regional problem here that demands a regional solution. For the vast majority of people, it doesn't make a whole lot of difference whether the Chiefs play or the Royals play in Kansas or Missouri. In fact, Kansas has 41% of the metro area population. And what I would suggest is the politicians from the state and local governments in Kansas and Missouri sit down like grown-ups here and devise some sort of a regional solution whereby both sides, put up some tax money if that's necessary, and then share in the revenue that would be generated by that. I think that makes a whole lot more sense because Kansas City is a lot different than moving the team, to Oregon or something. For most people, it would make a whole lot of difference for the region if the Chiefs, moved 15 miles down the road and played in Kansas. So I think, and I understand there's, rivalry between Kansas and Missouri, but, Quantrill's Raiders ceased activity 165 years ago, and I think it's time to bury the hatchet on that.
Oh, look at that. So we end with a pun intended with Tom Crookmeyer. Hey, thanks for being with us. And really, I enjoy these deep discussions on matters that do impact our lives. They really do. And so thanks for unpacking it for us, Tom. Appreciate it.
Well, thanks for having me on.
All right, Tom Crookmeyer. Oh, he is a budget expert, if there ever was one. Good words there. John, what's happening in your expert world when you come back?
Well, frequent flyer Steph, when the plane lands, why do they always crowd the aisle?
Bye-bye. We're back at 7:53.
This is Wake Up Missouri.
Touchdown, you better not land in Turkey. The New York Times says Turkey will now fine passengers who leave their seats before the plane is stopped taxiing. The Turkish Directorate General of Civil Aviation says the banned behavior will include unfastening your seatbelt, opening the overhead compartment and moving into the aisle before it's your turn. Oh, the fine? Get ready for this. $67. And now you know the rest of that
might be
story.
worth it, honestly, if you got a quick connection.
Yeah, $67 isn't a lot in the big picture of an international airline ticket, is it?
I must be missing something in human behavior here. Why do people do that other than to stretch your legs after a long flight? Is that, I mean, do you think they're going to open the door more hurriedly if you're lined up, if everyone's standing there? Why?
I think it's one of the rudest things.
Why does everyone stand up and just clog the aisle? I mean, it's okay. It doesn't make a difference to me. I usually, we buy the don't pick your seat basic. If I could buy a seat in the belly of the plane with the cargo, I would do it. But so we don't pick our seats. Helene and I sit apart. If there's a nice
sit apart? Are you a serial killer?
Well, I don't want to pay $50 to pick my seat.
Are you kidding?
Well, no, that costs money. Why would I do that? That's a waste of money.
Divorce.
Well, that's not what he meant when he said pick his seat, but I don't know.
Well, at any rate, so we just get occasionally we sit together if we can, but on basic economy you can't pick your seat. So
but you round up at the McDonald's when they're like, "Do you want to give to charity?" But you won't pay to let your wife sit next to you.
It's not that important to her to save the money. It'll buy another, it'll buy a margarita at the beach.
I can't.
No,
I felt like I knew who you were, Randy.
No. If it were that important to her, I would do it. But it's not important to her.
Okay.
From Stephanie, the frequent flyer with the rabid pit bull sitting on her feet.
I mean, there's things that my wife has this philosophy. Like when it comes to eating, she'll say NWTC or no NWTC, not worth the calories. So she'll look at a food and go, it's not worth. So she doesn't think in most cases. Now, if it's a long flight overseas, different. But for a short couple-hour flight, whatever. And, because there's better things to do with that money. I mean, if you pick your seat for $50, that's $100. That would buy you a reasonably nice meal, Stephanie Bell, somewhere. No? Okay. At any rate.
I disagree. Yeah.
So, but why do people stand up? It's not going to get you any there quicker. That's like turning the thermostat down to 50, thinking that the house is going to cool quicker. It's not. It's not going to.
I don't understand it, and I think it's rude. And I have been in multiple situations especially when you fly out of Colombia, you're almost always connecting.
Yeah.
You're always kind of rolling the dice a bit. And I have been in situations where 3 minutes was going to make the difference of whether I made my connection or not.
Yeah.
And so I think, there are times when you have a quick connection, and generally they know, like the flight attendants know that, and they'll say, hey, let the people who have a connection get off the plane.
Yeah.
But, but for me, if I know I'm cutting it close, oftentimes I will pay to move my seat toward the front so that way I can get off the plane earlier. Because I know that's on me, right? So the fact that people stand up and then they block the aisle or they butt and they didn't pay for that, it makes me angry.
Well, don't have to worry about me. See? Aren't you happy? I don't.
There you go.
I don't do that. See? Because I'm just a cheapo sitting in the back by the latrine.
And picking his seat.
Love that latrine smell in the back of the plane. It's a wonderful thing.
No, thank you. Not for me.
Don't
Not
eat the
for
giant
me.
mint.
Well, it's sort of like, it makes it feel that much better when you get to your resort destination, when you've suffered through a miserable plane flight.
I just feel, I don't know if people are nervous or whatever, but I feel like sometimes when people get on planes, they just black out and they lose all of their common sense, right? People behave horribly for
right.
no reason.
It's true.
What I don't like is when they start taking their shoes off with smelly feet.
Or bring on hot food.
Oh, don't do that honor the staff. Honor the staff if you're on the plane with her. I hope my wife has not been faking it all these years that she does. I don't mean there. I mean picking your seat. Picking your seat. Oh boy, we'll be back at 8:08.
Wake Up Missouri with Stephanie Bell, the Zimmer News Team, and your host, Randy Tobler.
Welcome back into Wake Up Missouri. We've got to get something straight right off the bat here.
Ashley Immel did text us that there's a good mineral sunscreen from Baby Danix.
Stephanie Bell, who I thought was my friend and who could have defended me, let me hang myself at the end of that last segment.
I didn't say it. You said it.
I know, but you could have said, Randy, we know what you're talking about. Instead, you laughed hilariously, implying something totally different than what I was trying to say. Okay, for those of you who are just joining us, welcome into Wake Up Missouri. I'm Randy Tobler, along with my former friend and co-host, Stephanie Bell, John Marsh, and Drake Whitman.
As my former morning show partner's wife used to say about us, you guys are like a bunch of 14-year-old boys.
Now, John knows. John's segment was about the Turkish Airlines charging for people that stand up before the plane hits the gate when you're arriving. And it got into a discussion of, Stephanie sometimes has a rapid connection. She pays extra for her seat. She doesn't like people who do that. And I just said, I don't pay for my seat. Helene and I don't always sit together. And you don't? Already making me sound like a Luddite, knuckle-dragging husband.
You said you don't pick your seat.
And pick your seat. And so we're getting some textures say, come on, Randy, everyone picks their seat now and then. Okay. To which I said, it's not important to my wife. All these years she's told me it hasn't been that important to her. Sometimes it is, sometimes it isn't.
To which you said then, I hope she hasn't been faking it these years.
So then we had, hang on. We had more banter. That was a little disconnected. And
again, you said it.
And then without enough time to sort of, for those who were just joining at the wrong moment, who only heard that, I said something to the effect of, my mind went, I didn't share with you, my mind was, I wonder if she's been making it up all these years that she doesn't want to sit next to me. But it was about the seats. I wondered if maybe it's really important to her.
And the phrase was faking it all these years.
But you guys know. Come on.
We know what
Have a
you
little.
meant,
I was, and instead of Stephanie saying, Randy, we know you're talking about maybe, it's about whether you guys want to sit together, and she's just been kind, trying to save money, but she really wants. Instead of that, it's like, look at you. She's been faking it all these years.
You think an OBGYN would know.
Right?
God. You guys, you're supposed to help me here. You're not supposed to let me sink myself. Gee.
Let's talk about what's happening in the State House today.
What's happening in the State House? Yesterday, some bills were filed.
Yeah.
But nothing really substantive happened. Are committee hearings going on now today or again?
I believe they are scheduled for today. So what happens, the bills were filed. They have to be referred to committee.
Yeah.
So we'll find out I guess they don't all have to be. There are some bills that are filed that probably won't get referred, but the important ones will probably get referred to committee today. And then there, I believe, are committee hearings on the schedule in the Senate today. So again, that was some of the consternation at the end of session, was that some of these items, certainly HB 19 had gone through both bodies, conference committee, lots of conversation about the projects in there, but some criticism over the way the stadium project came up was that it didn't work its way through the normal process, through committee. This is, I think, what you're going to see this week, potentially.
And they're talking education big time. It's kind of interesting that not everybody at the Capitol was there specifically for the special session, but Mike Keogh hosted the group to talk about the funding formula.
Yeah, he wants to hold it flat, apparently, right? The spend.
According to the Senate's website, the Appropriations Committee will meet at 10:30 a.m. and the Fiscal Oversight Committee will meet at 11 today.
Did I hear? I was driving to my assignment yesterday. Thank you, Scott, for hosting, and Stephanie holding forth along with Scott, and Chelsea was in. We had someone from the other side in.
Yeah, Chelsea Rodriguez.
Yeah.
I enjoyed
I don't know
hearing
Chelsea.
her perspective. She's the comms person for the Missouri Democratic Party.
Yeah, we like to get people with the wrong ideas on once in a while.
She had a good take on the situation, though.
Yeah, no, I'm kidding.
And certainly,
it's good to hear her.
and that's, about this week, a lot is going to come down to what the Democrats do, how mad they are, and what they want in return for their votes.
Because there may not be enough Republicans to get it done.
That's what Scott thinks.
That sounds like basically what's going on. It's a mirror image of what's going on in D.C., right? They're going to need some Democratic help in the Senate because they can't get it done with. You got Johnson and Rand Paul and Rick Scott, at least, who aren't on board.
Yep.
And I don't know. I mean, you just start looking at this. It was interesting to hear Tom Kruckmeyer. If you didn't hear that segment, it'll be up later on the podcast at 8:30 at the 7:35 segment when we talk with Tom. It sounded like he agrees with Patrick Tuohy from Show Me Institute that the net economic benefit is at minimum in question and may not be there, right, as it's thought to be. Many of our, we had Cindy O'Loughlin on, we had Mike Keogh on, we've had others that say, well, they think it's a net benefit. And so there must be some studies on the other side of the fence that show that. Wouldn't that be a fair summary, John, of what Tom was saying? That, it's debatable whether there's really net benefit. It's just that, to the community or to the state.
Well, yeah. I mean, that was kind of his take on it. And I thought it was interesting. He said, well, heck, if it goes somewhere, well, maybe develop the regional sports complex idea and share the money between taxing districts on both sides of the line.
That's a good thought. I don't know. It's I am concerned about some of these important facilities that were not funded with HB 19. That bill, the one of them, however many, couple dozen bills that right at the end of the session that they passed, the spending bills, and they didn't get it passed to fund the medical nuclear reactor in Columbia for University of Missouri.
Portion thereof, yeah.
Portion of the training facility in Southeast Missouri for law enforcement, right? Is it for highway patrol, I believe? Yeah.
There was some funding for a rural hospital.
Yes.
There was funding for the Juvenile Justice Center in Cole County. I mean, there was a lot of projects.
The inpatient mental health facility in Kansas City, I believe, right?
Mm-hmm.
So those are things, can't we all agree that those are fundamental operations of the state? I mean,
apparently the House can't agree. They didn't.
Yep.
I don't know. There was a lot of bad blood there at the end of the session. And then last week on Thursday when who was it? Doug Beck, I guess, proposed a procedural maneuver that they wanted to have a quorum instead of letting Senate President Pro Tem Cindy O'Loughlin just sign the bills that had been passed and send them to the governor's desk. And then that tirade that Stephen Weber went on. Holy cow. Man, yelling at, who was he yelling at there?
Tony Lukemeyer.
Woo. No, it wasn't Tony Lukemeyer.
Wasn't it Tony?
Travis Fitzwater.
Yeah.
It was Travis.
Yeah, it was Travis. Okay.
And Travis starts walking off, and I thought they were going to butt heads, literally. I mean, they crossed paths, and Travis goes then into the chamber in the back, I guess, or whatever, out the back by the speaker's dais. And as he's going out, Stephen Weber, freshman senator, Stephen Weber from the Columbia area, yells at him, "You're a coward." Oh, man. Wow. So I don't know.
Tempers are flaring, for sure.
I don't know what's going to happen. Then we got Josh Hawley, who reported on last night to Laura Ingram. This was interesting. He talked to a Secret Service whistleblower who knows about Joe Biden's behavior, allegedly, and he said this. Unbelievable.
Listen, I'll tell you something that I haven't said before because it came from a Secret Service whistleblower this past year. I talked to so many of them after the attempted assassinations of President Trump. But this Secret Service whistleblower actually was assigned to Biden, and he told me that Biden used to get lost in his closet in the mornings in the White House. I mean, the guy literally stumbling around in the White House residence couldn't find his way out of his own closet.
Now, if that's true, I mean, what in the world? Who was running the country?
Not him.
His chief of staff, some, advisor?
Jill?
Pete Buttigieg.
I mean, that's quite
frightening
the
stuff.
Allegation, yeah.
That's frightening. And I can't imagine Josh Hawley saying it if it hadn't happened. If
Right.
if the claim wasn't true.
Well, and then, people are acting shocked that Republicans are killing it in the polls, right? But
Right.
I think this Biden thing is not going away. It's a problem for the Democrats. And I think there are a lot of questions and my understanding is they're going to do some more digging and maybe have some hearings and dig into what people knew when. And I don't know. It's tough to imagine like that happening in the White House residence and it not leaking or someone not saying enough is enough.
Yeah. I agree. And this is the gift that for Republicans and for conservatives, it's the gift that keeps on giving, right? The Joe Biden stories that are coming out.
Well, I think right now it is a little bit. But again, we talked earlier about how Democrats don't have a plan and their only plan right now is Orange Man bad. And so I think, I am nervous about the midterms. I'm nervous going forward. So I think, the more we focus on Biden, that's water under the bridge. I think there are a lot bigger threats out there to us in the future, and we're going to have to start focusing on that.
I agree. I think that you've got to have substance. You can't just have style. You can't just have personality disputes and, personality assassination, essentially.
If we want to win elections, Biden was demented is not a winning play for us.
Well, but I think you can't trust the Democrats is a good one. I mean, that's part of the story, right? You can't trust them. Although that raises the bar for your credibility. You must establish that you're trustworthy if you're going to impugn someone else's trust. Used to trust that Steph would rescue me. That's gone under the. Forget about that. All right. Okay, so we're going to step aside. Let's see what Stephanie says about the markets at 8:24 when we come back. And later on, I got this love-hate thing with AI. I'll explain and ask your thoughts at 8:35. Stay there.
You're listening to Wake Up Missouri.
Actually, the inflation numbers are the best in 4 years. So why don't we stop trying to say this could happen and wait and see what does happen?
That's Scott Bessent and Margaret Brennan. Here's Stephanie Bell with the Morning Bell. Not the Daily DC Rundown, the Morning Bell.
All right, here we go. The markets were up yesterday with the NASDAQ up 0.67%, S&P up 0.41%, the Dow up 0.08%. As we are looking what drove those gains, it was communication services, technology, and energy. And good news, right, Randy? I mean, we're starting to see.
Great. Yeah.
I think for most of the indexes, they're pretty even for the year, even though we've kind of been riding a bit of a roller coaster.
Took a big swoon, but then recovered most, if not more than most.
Now we've been talking about how on Friday we're going to get some updated job market data from the government. So we will be keeping our eye on that. But in the meantime, if you are looking at making a change in your employment, you probably want to do your 2 weeks, give the proper notice, complete your exit interview, be professional, because recent data is showing that more and more people are hiring their ex-employees.
Really? Hiring them back?
I don't know that I even know anybody who left a place and then went back. I think that would be hard.
What's the why here?
We've seen it in the sales side of things in this business occasionally, but not very often.
They said, well, there's employees are more cautious to jump ship and that there's a slower hiring market right now. They said some of these, it's happening a lot in the tech industry. The highest rate of repeat hires was observed in tech jobs, where returning employees accounted for 68% of the new hires in March compared to just 34% last year. And they're saying some of these the employers are being more highly selective, so they feel more comfortable with folks that have been kind of vetted before.
A known quantity.
And then also from the employee's perspective, a lot of these industries require very highly skilled workers, and so there's only a small pool that you can really pull from. But I think that's a really interesting trend, and I wondered, is it a bad economic indicator?
Well, I would think if some of these layoffs that may have happened during the recession, and on top of that, remember the COVID, people were laid off that you didn't want to lay off. We had to do that because we weren't sure if we were going to have business when they shut down our ORs, for instance, in the hospital realm. And there was a lot of hard feelings, but those people were valued. It just, the job wasn't there. There wasn't any surgery going on, right? You had to furlough.
I know locally, I've heard that a friend told me a story that he'd had a long-time guy work for him in his body shop business who was a premier body man. The guy retired, and after about 6 months or so, they came to a mutual understanding to hire him back because he needed his skills in the workplace.
Yeah.
Maybe it happens more frequently than I had thought, but they said it's, even outside of the tech industry, that the number is in March, it was 35% of what they call boomerang hires compared to 31%, and that's across all industries.
I think the whole job, for those of us I haven't applied for a job in ages. I mean, most jobs are usually, why are you laughing?
No, you're looking at me. I don't think I've pretty much never applied for a job.
Yeah, but I think it's true. A lot of jobs are obtained through networking. Right. Yeah. I know. So, and yes, you apply formally, but I mean, just cold apply for a job out there and start filling out, forms on hire.com or whatever
Indeed,
it is.
Yeah,
I think that a lot of jobs, I don't know what the percentage is, but I've read substantial percentages are done through friends or knowledge or, whatever.
Yeah. I mean, the first
coworkers.
Every time I've ever looked for anybody, I immediately just start asking people I know, who do you know that's good? Who, you know anybody that's looking or not looking, who you got? And I would much rather do that than just get a cold resume.
Yeah.
Or headhunters.
Yeah, that's fair.
They're still a big deal.
You usually don't have a buzzard flying with eagles. So assuming that you have eagles flying with you, Stephanie, I used to think you were an eagle till you didn't back me up there.
Randy's going to take that one personally for a while.
Oh, I tell you. No, I mean, generally you have a network of people that you trust. And if someone they trust, you're more likely to have some trustworthiness than someone off the street you don't know, right?
That's right.
It's just the odds are with you.
And that makes sense with the boomerang hire.
Sure.
Presumably you've got a personnel file that's clean that you say, okay, maybe they left for more money. Maybe you can now offer them the more money that they want. And they were a good employee.
Yeah. So if you want to be boomerang hired, does that mean you come back groveling and say, I'm sorry I left. I thought it was better elsewhere. The grass wasn't greener on the other side of the fence?
Perhaps.
I don't know. Do you want to have Grok in the room at your next physical exam? We'll talk about that at 8:35.
Has America been fair to
Walls may soon have ears.
They don't already?
Your doctor may turn on his or her computer and say, hey, I'm recording this whole transaction because AI is going to start a note for me, a note draft. How do you feel about that? Fast-growing technology known as ambient listening taking over an onerous, that's true, but necessary task in healthcare. Doesn't have to be that onerous. Wall Street Journal, and those of you who make big bucks out of selling electronic software. The AI-powered systems are moving into hospital rooms, emergency departments, and what they're doing is capturing the discussion. And then they're getting pretty good at it to basically start a note as to, hey, why are you here, Stephanie? Well, it was the middle of the night, and I was wandering off trying to get to the bathroom, and I hit my toe, and now it's all purple and blue, and I can't walk. Okay.
I mean, actually, I don't know that I'm offended by that necessarily, because one of my biggest, there's nothing I hate more than filling out a form. Mm-hmm. I hate filling out forms. And so it feels like every time I show up, even if I show up in the same place, they're asking me all these questions.
Again?
And I'm like, I don't know when my, I guess I know that, but like when I'm like thinking my last birth, I haven't had like a lot of surgeries, but like your health history, right? Like you're just like, you know that, like that's your job to know that, and like when what medication I'm on,
maybe
you
not.
prescribed it.
No, but I won't know that because you saw a different doctor last month, and you'll see a different doctor.
But you're probably in all the same systems.
And everyone in your generation and younger goes to urgent care because they can't get into a doctor, and so you don't know what the heck's going on. So you have to make sure you reconcile everything.
I just feel like I answer the same questions over and over and over, and that's what I'm paying you to know.
No, you're paying.
So maybe now, if AI can help you know more about me, I have to fill out fewer forms.
No, it's still going to listen to what you say because it's. Yes, Drake.
Yeah, well, what about confidentiality? That's my biggest question here. I mean, if AI is listening in, don't doctors have patient confidentiality? And same with lawyers and their clients?
Well, you mean
we
you
would
don't
never
trust
put AI? We could never do that.
You don't trust Grok and ChatGPT and Gemini? I mean, there are proprietary medical software, some that are actually married to and created by the actual software manufacturer.
I would wonder about AI and the issues we still have with it when we use it personally, if it misreading things or it hears something and it transcribes it as something totally different, which isn't that big a deal, for the average person, but we're talking about a healthcare diagnosis, it might be.
Well, doctors for a long time have been using something called Dragon or systems like that basically it's the same as having a virtual transcriptionist. And it's a voice-to-text thing, and it's medically oriented. Some of them are getting better at machine learning to where they learn the way you say something because you say it and it says you said something else, right? And then you correct it, and then once you do, it hears you differently. I don't know. These things, I just did a medical malpractice risk module. So for your malpractice insurance, you take these little risk things. They say, hey, this is one of the things that is happening in healthcare. And I told my wife, we were driving to church the other day, and I said, all of these systems designed to prevent human error are creating the circumstance for more human error. Because no matter what AI does, you have to go back and edit that and read it, which means that takes more of your time, which means you don't have time to think about a patient's problem. If they would just sort of let people do what we used to do, and that's see the patient, put the important stuff in the note, not the stuff that's more important for the billing than it is for the care of the patient, and not have to be coders. My point is, this bothers me because I share the situation about privacy. I'm worried about that. Already we know that you don't have much privacy. Almost now, if you need a medicine for your autoimmune disease, if you need Ozempic, if you need an MRI for you because the knee X-ray didn't show anything and the PT for 6 weeks didn't do anything, now we'll let you do your MRI. You have to send the records, and how many people look at that? We already have a lot of threats to the privacy of our data, and I think this is now up there in some cloud at some server on a bunch of NVIDIA chips. Who's to say that someone can't hack into it? We're going to be talking to an AI expert tomorrow.
Yes.
At 8:08, right?
We are. One of my friends, he used to do like data security actually in the state legislature and has moved on from that. But talk to him about the real threats. Because in my mind, Randy, at this, you complain about this, that AI. But again, you have a phone, you've got an iPad, there are already computers in the rooms that you are at. You're transmitting the data already. So, like, is it any more of a threat than the threats we already live with day to day and have decided are fine?
Well, Randy brought up medical coders, and gee, they do EHRs and have for years, right, Randy? Where it's all digital and they know all of that, and that's, I guess, a lot of it's for billing, correct?
That's right. It's the medical record is now predominantly a billing document, not a communication document. Things like basically copy and paste, where people will take the previous visit, and in the interest of time, when you've got 10 patients in the emergency department, 2 of which are critical, 1 of which just came in with an acute problem, and you've got to get a big chart that justifies your existence and the hospital's existence and making sure you're compliant with this. And, oh, by the way, do you feel safe at home? Do you feel safe at home? You know, every visit you got to ask this stuff, which is, I'm not saying that feeling safe at home isn't important, but, you know, these discussions develop organically if you're allowed to have relationship with patients. I just think that I'm just concerned about it. I think it's something we need to keep our eye on. On the other hand, I needed to spray a little patch of some newly planted soybeans the other day for my food plot, but I needed to spray it with a mixture of 2,4-D and Roundup. I wore my respirator, thank you, but it was only my little 15-gallon ATV tank sprayer. You know what I did? I wimped out. Normally, I get my pencil and paper out and I calibrate my spray. I said, hey, Grok, I need to spray 0.7 acres at 2 quarts per acre of Roundup and 1 pint per acre of 2,4-D and a 15-gallon tank sprayer, blah, 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 blah. It was frightening. I mean, it came up with the answer. It
can be hugely helpful.
Oh, man.
And so how do you implement it in a way that still protects people's privacy, but that benefits us all? I think there are a lot of questions.
And Tony Blair is saying that AI will replace doctors and nurses and teachers. If we don't, with the national health system, we need to replace them, basically. Now, AI can't yet do the procedures, but that probably someday a robot will be able to suture up your laceration when you cut yourself with your knife. I don't know.
I mean, look at self-driving cars. Like, they're taking off in California and Arizona, and you think about the number of people right now who are kind of in the gig economy who drive for a living. I think they're at risk.
How come Tony Blair didn't say that AI might replace barristers, lawyers?
We're too good.
Oh, listen to this, are we?
They're busy trying to replace the surgeons, right?
That's right. Drake.
Yeah, I mean, well, this whole debate about the industry shutting down because of AI, and I think it's a little misleading because, I mean, whenever you go into the Industrial Revolution and whenever the first tractor was made, people were still tilling fields with plows and all of that, and everyone thought, oh, all these farmers are going to lose their job. No, the food became cheaper, their products became cheaper because there was less labor. I think the same thing is going to happen here. If there are robots doing surgeries and all that, I think that it's going to be scary for a while, and then as soon as you get your bill and it's half as much as it normally would have been, I think it'll be justified.
But here's the question, and this comes down to the question of human existential threat and our fertility crisis and the replacement levels. If people surmise that they may lose their jobs because AI is coming, they're not going to have a baby because they're going to wait a minute, how am I going to support a baby if I'm going to lose my job to AI? And it becomes a vicious cycle, right? And then could we extinct ourselves because of AI? Is that possible?
Again, I'm an optimist, and I'm thinking, like, if I want to have kids, AI might allow me to work from home more and be the kind of parent that I want to be.
What kind of AI are you talking about?
But seriously, I think I look at it on the other side of the coin. I mean, I do think that it is allowing folks to do more on computers remotely, and potentially it'll open up this whole new style of working that might allow you to have a more flexible schedule and have more kids.
I have a friend who was a sports medicine guy, and this sounds like the same argument that was made when arthroscopic surgery first came in, where they were like, oh, this is going to put the true surgeons out of business and all, and now it's a routine, regular procedure, especially in sports injuries, isn't it?
No, you're right. And even with like robotic surgery, you have to have a surgeon standing by at the table or an assistant, at least one, to get the equipment in there and to stand by in case a glitch happens and some audible is needed at the line, if you will. So I think that we will evolve, but will we reproduce? That's really a fundamental question. They talked about it on America First News before us, right? They talked about that this morning. They were worried about that. And I'm worried about it. Look, forget Randy. What does Randy know? Elon Musk is worried about it.
Well,
that should concern you.
He also has a beef with Sam Altman. And I do think, I think this new Sam Altman contraption, whatever the necklace pendant puck thing that's going to, we don't know what it is yet, but he's announced he wants to ship
Pendant necklace puck. We don't know.
We don't know yet. But it's kind of like what you're talking about in the doctor's office. It would just kind of listen all day long and then send you helpful summaries or notes later in the day, I think is what people think it's going to do. And yeah, I don't think we're ready for that.
I'm not ready for it. But I don't like doing the charts either. Most of us spend 90 minutes off of hours doing charts, at least. I usually spend 2 or 3 hours after a day doing charts or on the weekend. And many of the docs and nurse practitioners and PAs will tell you that's what they're doing. So there's got to be a way to
charting's a big part of it, isn't it?
Yeah, and so much of it is just BS. I mean, it's just, you can't say, for instance, it's not a legitimate document according to the imperial federal government and Medicare. If you just say, Stephanie came in today for her annual visit and her exam, including her pelvic exam, was normal today. You can't say that. Well, doctor, did you examine this part and that part? And so you have to name each part and say normal, 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 normal. That's BS. We know what a normal exam is. And so we used to be able to say exam was normal except for blah,
but
blah,
then
blah.
I sue you and I say, actually, you didn't check my left breast and now I
Right.
have breast cancer.
Right.
And so, but if you just said normal, you wouldn't have any confirmation that you actually performed that.
That's
exam
because you
on
don't
me.
trust me. Okay, thank you.
So I mean,
No, as a lawyer, if it's not written, it didn't happen.
but
right?
I don't think
if it's not written, it didn't happen.
Is the end of the world, or that it's going to take
No, I don't think
everyone's
it's
job.
at the end of the world.
Back
Sounds
to
like you
faking
do.
it again.
Yet. We'll come back with leftovers. This is a wild day. Is it the weather, the barometric pressure? I don't know. Be back with leftovers at 8:53.
This
It's that time of the program, Wake Up Family, where we talk about leftovers. Let's do that. Oh, by the way, one little leftover from me. I had some advice on brisket, and I told the gentleman who texted that the brisket I did a couple weeks on Memorial Day weekend was fantastic. I followed a mixture of recipes, and a lot of his and a lot of Rachel's and some others. It turned out very, very well. So thank you, because I have leftovers, and I'm going to eat them and devour them very soon. John, what's in your leftover plate?
This is a woman who had a good visit to the neighborhood liquor store. She bought a lottery ticket at Mr. G's in California, Missouri. She won the Show Me Cash jackpot, $273,000. I'll buy you a lot of Busch Light.
I'm telling you.
She might be one of those boomerang employees. Take a little bit of time off for a couple of years and then come back, right?
Yeah.
There you go.
I
don't know.
There are a lot of sad stories about that when someone lands the lottery, how
fast
all of a
they
sudden
spend it.
They have so many friends. All of a sudden, friends everywhere, right? Are they invested foolishly?
You know, they passed that bill a couple of years ago that allows you to be anonymous, and I think that's the right thing to do, because I wouldn't want people to know.
It's smart. It's smart.
I mean, there would be signs.
I remember we had a story a number of years ago where a Herman couple had won the lottery and all, and the guy had been looking before that to, go get a new John Deere, and got up the next morning, and the guys at the implement place had parked a big, shiny green John Deere right in his driveway.
Oh, really?
So saying, we got your back.
Oh, that's a good one. That's a good one.
We talk a lot on the program, Randy, about education and education choice and what's happening in that. Yesterday, the task force that Governor Kehoe had put together to redo the foundation formula met for the first time, and they are tasked with coming up with something new. And I think they have to deliver a report or recommendation to the governor by the end of the year, or maybe December 1, 2026. So they've got a lot of work to do.
Yeah, I know that this year they increased the funding, and he pushed for that. It's basically a holding mechanism, right? But I think they're going to really delve into that, and it needs some serious reformation. There's no doubt.
This was the one where they really got in the weeds, where they talked about the multiplier and in the founding formula and the state adequacy target, and also, boy, if you're not part of that one's kind of Chinese to a lot of us.
That funding, with all the cost, I just remember when I was on the school board, this was 15 years ago, the tech thing was becoming sort of obligatory. All the tests were online, everything. For a small rural district, and for any district, man, tech costs are absolutely skyrocketing. So if those seats aren't filled, and if the funding related to those seats being filled, go down, meanwhile your pricing is going crazy. I don't know how you make it happen. I know that a lot of the superintendents and administrators are really quaking in their boots over funding. There's no doubt about it. Now, Mike Huckabee, the ambassador to Israel, had some interesting words the other day about France had basically came out and said we needed to have a Palestinian state. There needs to be a UN conference. We need to get this. They came out on the side of the Palestinians. Here's what old Mike said. Boy, this guy is a wordsmith.
Really so determined to see a Palestinian state? I've got a suggestion for them. Carve out a piece of the French Riviera and create a Palestinian state.
There you go. If you're so
it's
happy.
On the med.
Yeah.
I don't even think the Palestinians would want to live in France. I'm going to be quite honest.
No?
No, I wouldn't live in France, and I don't think they would either. It's getting close with the immigration, though. I mean, there's a lot of immigrants there.
Even now, Europe elected a more populist right-wing prime minister or president the other day. Apparently, he adopted, instead of America first, he adopted the Trump Poland first, little moniker. But we're seeing more and more. Even the liberal leader of the UK is saying, guys, we got it all wrong with immigration. Our values, our common cultural values are no longer shared.
But then look at Canada. They had a conservative candidate in their last election, and they went the other way.
Well, I think they got mad at the tariff talk.
Of course they did.
And that guy was on the road to victory. What was his name? Pourbois, whatever. Yeah. He was on the road to victory. And then, I don't know, the Trump, Canada tariff talk didn't help things one bit. Yeah, so we will be talking AI tomorrow. Justice Kavanaugh sort of poked his finger in the eye of the Second Amendment. We'll talk with you and Zach Smith tomorrow as well. It was an interesting thing he did there. SCOTUS has, I think, taken up 4 more cases as well. So we've got some other interesting things coming your way, and I will try to make up with my wife for what I was mistaken. See you tomorrow and Wake Up.
You said it.